And thanks for having me, and thanks to Valpo and the folks putting this online. Yeah, so I guess like what we saw, we did the Obama for America campaign. We realized the technology was pretty terrible, both for people who were using the technology within the campaign, but sometimes also for people who actually were experiencing it as end consumers. And people think about that campaign as being really, really groundbreaking, and it was in a lot of ways. But there's still, it still kind of lags behind most consumer experiences. You know? And people think about it with the benefit of hindsight or revisionist history, right? And we say, oh, it was wonderful, the tools did all these things. But really in 08, the breakthrough was, you know, basically mass emails that were well written, that went out and connected to an online fundraising page. Right? That was kind of the real thing. Huh. You know, in 12, we got much more accurate around data science and things like that. So anyway, I guess I'm getting way away from the question. So the thing we saw was that at the end of the campaign, we kept getting these really awkward calls. Right? Hey, we're Facebook. Hey, we're Google. Can we talk to some of your engineers because we know they won't be busy in a few weeks? And we're like, hey, listen, that sounds great. Go away. We're very busy, right? There's a couple months left to this election. We'll wait, right? They're not going to go anywhere too quickly. You know? So afterwards, we had all these companies come, and they would organize these happy hours, right? So we'd hang out, we see Facebook come, we see Google come, and what they wanted was all the stuff these kids had learned about how it is to create online, offline community, how technology can play a role in that kind of creation. And we thought, well, this is going to make Facebook's stock price go up, or Google's stock price go up, but it doesn't actually impact any of the issues that are existential in the world today. Right? And they're getting worse and worse. And you look at foundations that kind of concentrate on their money. You look at government that is shrinking in its support to the social sector. If you look at even high-dollar donors, they tend to be concentrating their giving more and more. And so what you see is there's generations of people who don't have a connection to nonprofits, don't have a connection to civil society in the ways we used to think about it in this country. So, and technology has never really been good at building that sort of associational life. It seems like the internet kind of missed the way the nonprofit sector works. And so you can look at all these things. I mean, there's $300 billion given every year by individuals. Where does it go? What impact does it have? Most family households give 24 times a year. Most family households can't tell you the 24 organizations they supported or what the gifts were or what happened with those gifts. So there's all this irrationality. Clearly, there's a lot of need. Right? There's a lot of things that are going on in the world that could use the help and the tools and the talented people out there. So what we saw was, are there ways that we can make giving more transparent? Are there ways that we can make giving easier for people? That was a lot of what we did at OFA was the transactional cost. Can you make it quicker? Can you make it easier? Will that encourage usage? Well, that will. But then in addition to that, can you start to figure out how to help people tell their message and tell their message to a new audience? So, yeah, that.
That's how Public Good was born.
Yeah, so we created it as a benefit corporation. So we said, when we first came out, we thought about being a foundation, and we thought about being a nonprofit, but we didn't think those forms actually accomplished what we were setting out to do, which was really to bring world-class technology capability into the nonprofit sector. And so we thought being a social enterprise, so one part benefit, one part corporation, kind of achieved that for us.
So do we have some questions from folks here that they would like to ask about Public Good? In the way that it...
I was surprised at your stats for online giving. Because coming from United Way with 1,800 worldwide offices, that's what everybody says. You got to go to online giving. You got to go to online giving. And we've got Mobile Cause as our tool. We're in our second year subscription, have used it maybe a handful of times. It's just not responsive for us. It's not responsive from a worldwide platform because everybody's trying to figure out how to best leverage that. I do see that from your stats, though, that you see an increase. There will be an increased giving. I think that has to do with the generational shift of givers as well, and the language of their common language of being on their phones or in text to give sort of formats. Do you see any other trends for that?
Sure. So yeah, it's interesting. Whenever you start to talk about this market, because it is so big, it's hard to really know what's happening. I mean, I think things you can say with confidence are, generally speaking, people under 70 are moving online more and more. It seems like 70 plus are still sticking with check or paper. What we've seen is that the highest volumes in growth tends to be 55 and over. So folks who maybe were doing more traditional forms and now are starting to experiment with online. I don't see a lot going on with mobile. I mean, I think that, how do I say it? A lot of times people lead with tech. So here's a super old saying. They used to call technologies wet dogs, right? So a cell phone originally was a wet dog technology, and the metaphor there was you really have to love a wet dog to pick it up, right? And right, and back in the day it was that way. If you had to carry that suitcase, right, like who needs a cell phone, right? Yeah, it's like I look like a jerk, I'm done,
only
right?
a 10-minute charge.
Right, but now it's become ubiquitous and cool, and it's like, okay, well, of course I would do that. And I think what you see is people keep talking about different technology solutions for giving, but I don't think that those are really rooted in behavior, So like, okay, if you look at like 08, we crushed text-based giving in the campaign because we had an event, and the event was so well coordinated that the president, or at that time the candidate, Obama, could say, now pull out your phone and text this number, and I'm in. And we had a whole program set up, and so the program supported the use of the tech. You had the call out from the stage, you had the tech support, you had the signage, and it all kind of syncopated and ran together. And I think those things are what really drive tech adoption. And I think a lot of times when you get like, oh, this is a new mobile thing, or this is a new thing that's out, I don't think people necessarily are going to use it. We've seen this, like, not to keep on picking on Google, because they're awesome. They have Google.org. They have a thing called One Day, right? Which is like,
One day giving, right?
Yeah, right. You can open up the app. Hey, today I can give $1 to somebody else, right? And their adoption on it is terrible, right? Because again, there's no why for me, right? I need a why. I need you to tell me this thing even exists, And so it's kind of a rambly answer, but to me, I think it's less about the tech and more about how it's being used or how it's connecting to people.
So one of the ways in which the nonprofit sector has utilized data is in the cultivation of contact information, right? Yeah. Donor lists. And sometimes that can be seen as a valuable proprietorial
my list.
Right, my list. Is there a revolution going on in that thinking now? Does the kind of technology that you're bringing into play and other people are bringing into play challenge that in some way or invite us to move beyond it?
Well, that's our hope. One of the things we saw, so in 12, really 11 and 12, I traveled the country and went to different field offices and talked to people. And what we were trying to figure out was what made people do crazy stuff, right? What makes you volunteer to sit in the back of a field office and potentially sleep in that field office on cots as you get closer to the election? Like, these people are doing this, there are people working 30, 40 hours a week minimum as unpaid volunteers, right? What makes you do that? And so when we talked to them, what we realized was that the highest indicator of somebody being willing to do that was that they had almost no time because they were giving to everything else. If you wanted the best field organizer, if you wanted the best neighborhood team leader, you went and you talked to the PTA leader who was also involved in her church, who was also involved in this and this and this. And you're like, I don't know how you do this, but you can do another 20 hours a week, okay, And so what we saw was that there's an indicator of sort of overall community engagement that you can only measure by looking outside of the one organization and understanding really richly these are the different touch points that you have within your community. And I think when you look at data from nonprofits, the point of view is always we have this rich data that we look at through this one lens of this is our view on this person. But if you really knew that this person was also involved in these other ways with these other organizations, maybe there's a deeper relationship that you could form with your own group. An example I'll give is in Illinois, there's Angelic Organics. It's basically a community-supported agriculture group. And they wrote to us really early on and said, well, we should also be included in your violence prevention results for the work we do in the South Side. We're like, you sell vegetables. How do you do anything to fight gun violence in the South Side of Chicago? Like, oh, well, actually, we run a program that works with ex-offenders and teaches them life skills and reduces recidivism by quite a bit. I'm like, oh, actually, you're absolutely right. You should be in these results. And the point is that if you both like safe communities and good food, you may be more likely to support them than you would somebody who can only answer one side of that. But without having that data, you won't know it. So one of the goals for us with Public Good is that the idea that you can control on your own profile all the different things that you've done and where they show up. So if you don't want to let people know that you support an organization for whatever reasons, you're supporting an LGBT organization and you're not out to your parents, right? Okay, you don't want that known, that's fine. But we do want to be able to share that information as much as possible so that other organizations can say, oh, wow, Elizabeth is really into Valparaiso. Maybe there's something about that.
Sir.
Right? Got the eye. Maybe there's something about that we can have a conversation about that relates to my own organization or the things that we're doing, and we can find commonality in something.
So that the nonprofit should not feel threatened by that information being shared, that there's an abundance of possibility, and to get into a mindset of abundance about it more than scarcity might help.
I think that's absolutely right. I mean, I think most of the time, there's almost no case anymore in which holding that information back is helpful. Right? I mean, there's definitely cases where you sell it. And you see this a lot actually with crowdfunding sites sometimes, right? They'll resell the email addresses, which can be kind of a dicey thing to have happen. But when you talk about it, I guess the analogy we use is this. I'm kind of butchering this answer. But like, if you think about it, when you go to the mall, right, there's a bunch of stores in the food court. Because at some point you're going to be hungry for Italian, and at some point you're hungry for Mexican. But then if you're hungry, you can go back to the food court and get food. I think the same thing is true with nonprofits. If you want to fill your soul, maybe sometimes it's by supporting one program, sometimes it's by supporting another. But that doesn't mean those two nonprofits are in competition. That just means they're in competition, in that little moment. It's not just about one transaction, it's about a relationship.
So taking that longer view again, we've talked about the importance of a more iterative mindset for approaching the kind of work we do in the social sector, but that also goes for seeing the long view of how people may come and go from our organizations.
That's exactly right.
Yo, did you have a...
because I have a class. So because most of my students at Paris University are international graduate students. Because I'm teaching graduate design course there. Most of them are really excellent students. Uniquely opportunity there. Because personally, I try to make some connection with my personal connection to non-profit organization that my students during graduate program, also during OPT, there is a period for international graduate to pursue their career in America to find a future employment. Anyway, there is a big gap. There is many possible human resources who would be eligible, who would be willing to engage in non-profit organizations, design projects, but I really have limitation. Also, they are all international graduates. Also, my former student at Chicago State University, some students they had excellent skill and sense and knowledge, but difference are fundamentally honestly compared with the SAIC, because SAIC is well connected to art and design industry in Chicago with the internship program. So that's why I may have similar situation with the Chicago State University. I really try to find a way, not only through financial support or donation between organization who to be willing to work with minority. That is another possibility that you may think as part of your business, that it will help people who have very limited network in America to find another way.
Yeah, definitely. No, there's a real problem. I mean, even joining the campaign, like I had all these tech skills, right? But I knocked doors, right? I volunteered in soup kitchens, right? And that work was good work. I mean, it's stuff that needs to get done, But there is an idea of, is it more valuable? Like ideally, it should be valuable to get the highest value skills you have and have you do that, as opposed to something just sort of anybody can do. And I don't, there's a couple of groups out there that are trying to solve this a little bit. So there's a Taproot Foundation is one. There's also a startup out of New York called Catch a Fire, and they're doing like skills-based opportunity stuff with the LinkedIn API, so the volunteer stuff there. But yeah, it still is definitely an issue. And I think again, this is kind of a gnarly problem piece where it's like, in any other market, you get to a marketplace solution and you drive efficiencies out of it, right? eBay, Amazon, Uber, right? Drivers over here, people need rides over here, put it together and let it go. And somehow in the civil society sector, it still isn't a thing yet, right? So we've got foundations giving money here. We've got organizations like businesses giving money and having employee matching days. But somehow there's people over here, and like the volunteer piece and everything else doesn't really get lined up as well as we hope it could. I think that's why it's an exciting time in tech.
Just was I try to get my international credits to be ready for the market. Yeah, we have to be visually creative, also wish to be disciplined, but also technically we should be highly oriented to compete with just ordinary design or that. That would be a part also still I feel limitation that kind of after graduation there are possibility. But definitely I will look at the non-profit organization that we are talking.
I think also that the role of trust, which is built on interpersonal interaction, is so crucial in the flow of attention and resources in the social sector. And that, even though you're concerned about irrationality and you're seeking more evidence-based reasoning, I think you would probably agree, wouldn't you, that trust can never disappear from the equation. And so building up those relationships of trust by doing anything and everything to get to know people is going to be absolutely essential to create those connections. So I know you have to go. Thank you very much for being here. Kim,
Thank you.
yeah, thanks so much. And we are coming fairly close to the end here, but I didn't know if others have questions or comments.
So I was interested in what you were talking about on the Obama campaign and the engagement matrix that you were talking about. And so it wasn't share this, it was go watch this, it was check out this person's bio, check out the issues. And so can you talk a little bit about the extent to which you listened as well? Because I can imagine that some of the issues were actually formed, or I guess I'm guessing that some of the issues were actually formed and positions were formed based on what you learned from those interactions with people.
Yeah.
And I'll let you think I'll keep talking.
Okay.
So one of the frustrations that I observe is that we have a whole nonprofit community that is all about, I need to get this technology. You have United Way of America saying we need to do mobile, everybody's got to do mobile. And so it's this push from somewhere to do these technical things without the preparation for learning how to listen when people want to engage and when people want to participate. And to realize you don't have to change everything about your organization, but maybe there is something collaborative that you can do with your donors, with your volunteers, with people who want to be engaged in this issue in some way or
Yeah.
fashion.
No, I think all that's absolutely right. So, I won't say anything else. We're good.
No.
That's the only thing. So, we never changed a lot about policy, right? We stood for what we stood for, and that was very well thought out, and that was very concrete. But what we did do a lot of listening on was how we interacted with people and what things meant for them. So one of my favorite moments is we went to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and because Albuquerque happened to be one of the most organized states for whatever reason. They had a really just an awesome group, and they were using tons of just tech, right? Facebook groups and Google things and all this different stuff that they kept going in between elections, whether there's a campaign or not. They just had, hey, we're these lefties, we're going to hang out and do our thing, right? And so we went out there, and as I've probably said before, I'm really lazy. So I like other people to make design insights for me, you know. And so there's a method called participatory design. So you get people around a table, you break them up into teams, and you say, hey, like, how would you solve this? And so you do that, and then we showed them the solutions we had, and we said, well, cross out the things you don't like and circle the things you do like. And get up on camera. Tell us what your team thinks. This lady came up, and I could have just hugged her, because she gets up, and we've been having these fights about what went on the homepage of this organizing tool, right? And people from the campaign said, well, it's very clearly we need to get out these things, this messaging, this, these are the things we need them to do. And so she got up and she said, I hate this page. She goes, there's nothing for me. And she was right, there wasn't. There was lots of stuff the organization, right, needed to say, hey, like, this is what we want you to do. What's here for me, right? I'm a volunteer. I just put in a 4-hour shift, an 8-hour shift, a 12-hour shift. I have to log into this stupid tool, and it looks like a job. What's there for me? She was right. We actually made a video. We put videos up there for them. So when you did something, you saw why you were doing what you were doing, right? We connected them back to the message of this is what the organization is doing, this is why your work matters. Towards the end, we actually worked with, this got spun out, Major League Baseball used to have this awesome video platform. So we worked with them and we basically made a TV station on the website where they heard from people within the campaign. So it's 60 days out, what are we doing? Well, you as a volunteer can go to this special link and hear what we're doing to get out the vote, why your work matters, what does it mean. Now, it took a lot of time from somebody at the office, they had to sit down and do it, but even 5-10 minutes, right? We got the president to do the last one, and he broadcast live to 30,000 people just across our website. And it was a reason for people to get charged up and to come in and do something. And they heard a little bit back. But I think your instinct is right. Like we'll hear over and over again from these different organizations. We've worked with over 1,000 now in the past couple of years. I want more highly engaged members. We want a really highly engaged community. Okay, what does that mean? What would a highly engaged person do? Can you tell me what a non-engaged person does in their given day? What does the highly engaged person do? What's the difference? Okay, what is that difference worth for the organization? Okay, so if you can start to give me that framework, then I can start to figure out these are the techniques, these are the ways we can do it. And oftentimes I think that is still done inside of a boardroom, and oftentimes it isn't done just by saying to people, hey, this is what we're about. Does it resonate? Do you care? I know a lot of nonprofits aren't often willing even to bring up money, right? You're willing to make the ask, but not really say like sort of how it works or where it goes. And it's always funny, coming and reflecting on it really this time around, for the election cycle. Does anybody know what was Bernie Sanders' average donation?
It was low, like
$29.
29 or 30 or something, yeah.
Right, but you all know,
It's
right?
massive.
He came out and said it over and over
Yeah.
again. Hey, $27, I made 27. Because it's absolutely shameless. Because it's an immediate sign of support. Obviously people like my message. They give me $27, right? And I think that comes from kind of the band world I used to be in, right? If you want to know how to validate it, the people show up at your show and pay $10 to see it, And I think if we really believe as nonprofits in the work that we're doing, and we really believe in the change we're making, then we should feel equally okay about telling people, hey, it costs money to make change, and it costs time, it costs effort, but we're gonna get there together. You know, is this the way you wanna go? I think the more you can do that, the better off you are.
And that's another thing Bernie did. He would say, I guess if you gave money, then you would get a video that said, "We're in this together."
Yep, exactly
Yeah.
right. Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
right. So that's that.
Community organizing there.
Yeah.
Yeah, Marshall Gans style.
Well, we are all in this together, but I know that we also have other places at times that we have to be, and it's 1:30. So I think probably we're going to have to sort of wrap up formally, but I don't think you're running anywhere, so maybe folks have other questions.